Good morning. We're making our way through Daniel. Last week, we checked, we read the Greek version, and we looked at what they told about some other like political shenanigans and whatnot that were going on as to why those in political leadership, religious leadership really, but we have to remember in most places throughout world history, church and state really are not that separate. There's huge commingling between the two because if you belong to a particular state, you should have a certain religion, and so people wanted to get rid of him for political reasons, but kind of used what they could to get at him, and we're going to see that even more profoundly today. Not so much as to why they want to get rid of Daniel, but how they get rid of Daniel. So we have a little bit more of the backstory. Okay? And so now we turn to Daniel chapter 6. Okay. Okay. I lost my bookmarker. And I'll be wandering around for a while trying to find it. So, but that's the bad thing, because now when you use your computer for stuff, it's like, okay. So I don't really use the hard text as much as wow, strange. Whereas when it was a hard only use the book, it was like, oh, bloop, bloop, you could always get to everything, but not so much. Anyway. So, okay. So we're on Daniel chapter 6. And I'll put a little thing here. I don't want it. There we go. Okay. So I parsed it out in a number of small sections because there's a fair amount of stuff going on. So the first few verses are they're going to give us the lay of the land. Okay, we need to remember that there's a new king in town, and it's not just the Babylonians, but it's the Medo-Persian Empire, which is a change in culture. Even though in a sense it's not a complete overthrow of the previous empire, it's kind of like just taking it over and kind of changing it, as opposed to completely just vanquishing it, ruining it, and that sort of thing. Okay, so let's look at verses 1 and 2. So it pleased Darius, so he's the emperor, he's the king. Okay, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. So, these satraps, they're like 120 people who are going to help run the empire. Okay? So we would probably want to look at them like 120 governors. Okay? So not necessarily like congressmen and so they're in charge of a particular area, but they have to answer. So according to what we learn in Daniel, it's what? There are 120 and they have to answer to 3, right? One of whom is Daniel. So if it's broken up into thirds, then it'll be 40. 40 guys have to answer to one of the higher officials, if that's how it's kind of functioning. So you'd have the emperor or the king, the 3 presidents, if you want, or the higher officials, and then 120 satraps. Okay? So we can kind of see how the structure's laid out. So the king doesn't get lost in the noise, but it's not that big of a chain of command where it doesn't, if something is really serious, it could get good to the emperor fairly quickly. See? So it's, you don't want to get lost in the noise, you want to delegate, but you want to be responsive. And that seems to be a pretty good way. If you were to look at it, the issue might be you have 3 guys directly below the king, and below each one of those 40 So now 40 guys, that's a little harder span of control. You can have a couple of them that are just bad and you may not know it for a while. Okay? So, so that's how things are kind of set up. But Daniel is not a favored guy. We already know that he's made a lot of what? I'm going to use the terminology that's used today. He's made a lot of the deep state upset. Okay? And so these are people who are there and they're just part of the governmental infrastructure, right? And so he's in charge, but they don't like him. He's a Jew. He's an outsider. He's not part of the in group. Okay? And it's not weird. If you run a successful empire, you want people who are brought into it to be successful. But normally they don't filter all the way to the top. See? So most empires run on meritocracy and favoritism. You have to have enough favoritism to keep your core group of people happy, but not so much where the empire doesn't run well, it's inefficient, and it'll collapse. So you have to have that balance, and the king has to be able to figure that one out. Okay, but Daniel's done enough good stuff where he's like, hey, I want him right below me. Okay, so if you're part of the deep state, I don't know what else to call it because that's so politically tinged today, but it fits for this. Then you'd go, well, we want to get rid of him, right? And you're going to use the institutional whatever you could leverage to undermine him. Okay? Let's continue on. Verses 3 through 5. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Now, what would that look like? Because he's not going to be set over the king, which would mean that he would be like the king's right-hand man, and probably the daily running of the empire would fall to him, and that would free up the king to deal with the big issues, but the daily administrative stuff that should be running well on autopilot but needs particular tweaking once in a while, he would give that to Daniel. That's what makes the most sense, okay? If he's going to do that. But if you're going to do that, you have to have somebody very trustworthy, okay? So the king trusts Daniel, otherwise this wouldn't even be going through his mind, okay? Okay, then the president and the satraps sought to find a ground for a complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. Probably meaning that he wasn't corrupt. Okay, so corruption is part of most empires, the thing is you want it to be as little as possible, because wherever corruption is very prominent, it's bad for the nation. Things don't run well. The economy isn't often robust because meritocracy isn't rewarded, but you're the right person or whatever. So these men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." So what do they know about Daniel? Or what can we surmise that they know about Daniel? Two things. What's the first? Concerning his... Right. Okay. But concerning, integrity, right? Now, since they can't get him, they're saying, what's the only way that we can get him? They know that he's a faithful Jew. So they're saying, okay, well, that's how we're going to get him. They can't get him on anything else. I suppose maybe if they made something up, but it would be pretty hard, for that to stick, because you're going to have to get people to make false accusations and, and if it backfires, not pretty. Okay. So this is an empire where if you get in trouble, it's bad for you. It's not like us, for the most part, right? I mean, we're not that bad. So, compared to ancient empires, okay, let's qualify that, okay, because there are still some grievous things that happen, but but the way that we're set up, it's set up in a way to try to minimize the chance of that. Okay? All right. So, excellent spirit within him, that's page 2 on the lesson, emphasizes not just skill, but a divine quality of character and wisdom. So the ESV captures this nuance well. Okay? So the ESV they're good on translating a number of things in this section. So I kind of wanted to praise it because sometimes I'm just like, the ESV's a little off here, but they did a pretty good job here this time. Okay, so let's continue on. Okay, verses 6 through 9. Then these presidents and satraps came by agreement. Now, I would think that these presidents, that would be the 3 presidents and the 120 satraps. Now, it's probably not all of them, but a large enough portion of them where the emperor has to take notice, right? Now, the thing is, what we don't know is whether Daniel is no longer one of these presidents and whether he's kind of the emperor's right-hand man. The text doesn't say that, but it kind of thinks it could be if these presidents, if it's 3 that come to him, who are the 3 higher officials. So, okay, it's not clear on that yet, but let's see. Okay, so then these 3 presidents and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and inform an injunction. It says all, which may not be all, but that's, but it's large enough where the emperor goes, okay, there's a good consensus for what these guys are proposing. Okay? So he's going to give it a good listen, just, right? I mean, you want your people to be happy if it doesn't really cost you anything, right? So ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes a petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into a den of lions. Now, if they're coming to you with this specific request for 30 days, shouldn't that set off a couple ding, 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 ding? What's going on here? Because it's for 30 days. So I would think, well, do they want to get someone? Okay. So now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians. So this is going to be a no kidding decree that once it's made, not even the emperor could change it. Okay. And so those are really serious decrees. And you would think you would only want to do that in super serious situations, right? It's like the Pope when he speaks ex cathedra, right? Kind of when he's supposed to speak without error. The Pope's only done it a few times, okay? Because you don't want to use that and then say something stupid, right? So, I mean, in a sense, because it's something where, the Pope is saying that he's speaking something that is without error, it's used rarely, but it does exist. So it's something like that, okay? So, anyway, so therefore, so all of this is going on. What we don't hear is the discussion. It just says, therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. I mean, right there I'd go, something's going on here. Maybe he did ask that. And they go, oh, well, no, King, this is blah, blah, this is the reason why we're doing it. And they may have given him a good reason that may have said, oh, okay, I know they're not trying to do somebody in. This is for some good purpose, okay? But somehow, if he just bought it hook, line, and sinker and didn't even ask questions, I think the guy's pretty dumb. But I'm thinking he asked questions and, but they knew the answers. They knew the answers he wanted to hear, and they gave it to him. So when you're the head guy and you're below him, well, I don't even need to go that far. When you're a child and you have a mom and a dad, well, let's go to dad for this, but let's go to mom for that. Why do kids do that?
Because mom is usually easier.
Well, it depends on what the thing is, right? So which parent is more geared towards saying yes for something than the other. So kids are excellent at just kind of playing parents off, one against the other. And so same thing, these guys, they know what to say that will make the emperor happy. Their lives depend on it. Okay? So the question is of course, do they tell him the bad news he doesn't want to hear? Right? That's really important. And a lot of times, well, he gets mad, let's not. But you need that if you're running an empire. Okay? So, so that's the situation, right? But what's the punishment if somebody disobeys or breaks this decree? Cast into the den of lions. Okay? So this also shows kind of the change in leadership, because before, what was used to punish? The fire, right? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? But now this is the Medo-Persian Empire, not the Babylonian. So they're not big on fire for religious reasons. So they have another means of bad punishment, which is throwing you into a den of hungry lions, which is bad too, right? So the fire would be painful, really painful for a short time, and then, that I think the den of lions would be painful for a little bit longer. So there's what is the den of lions? So it's a big pit with steep sides. I think we may have seen pictures when we were kids or whatever. And then there's opening. So when you're thrown in there, you really can't crawl your way out. Okay. And the lions can't get out either. Okay. So what you do is you have hungry lions in there. You throw somebody in there, and that's how the lions are going to live. Now, I guess if there's nobody to throw in there for a while, you're going to have a lion keeper. So make sure, that, you don't want them to die, but you want them to be hungry, right? So, yeah. So, and so that gives a little bit of the background, right? So that they're not really that big on fire, but, okay, they're doing something else. And the decree that cannot be changed, that's one of those super serious decrees. Okay. So we don't have that in America, do we? There's an executive order, but the president could just rescind it. Or Congress passes a law, but then Congress could change, nullify it. Or it could go to the Supreme Court and say, no, that's not constitutional. Okay. So we don't have draconian laws like that, right? Not really. Not unless somebody's trying to do somebody in or something like that. Okay, verse 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God as he had done previously. He could have prayed without opening his window. I don't want to sound like a chicken liver, but that's probably what I would have done. Right? It's like, well, I'm still going to believe what I'm going to believe, but if I pray with the window open or pray with it closed, to me that's no big deal. But for Daniel, this has been his established practice. So my guess, since this is his established practice and people know it, for him to stop, it would be interpreted as recanting his belief. Or maybe he doesn't really believe that strongly. See? So, if you have this well-established pattern, then what do you communicate with stopping? See? And so that seems like that's the situation, right? And so, so what's the deal with 3 times a day? Well, that's kind of we see that in the New Testament before the apostles get kicked out of the temple, right? And they're going to the temple, and then, of course, the leadership doesn't want them there because they're like, you're too disruptive. We're tired of you telling us that Jesus is the Messiah. But they had the 3 times of prayer. Okay? So, in fact, you carry it over into the Christian church. So we also have kind of those prayer times. And then he would face Jerusalem. So that goes back to the dedication of the temple with Solomon. Okay? So that's kind of that practice. Okay. So, yeah. So for him to stop, there's a whole lot of stuff that's involved with that. Because otherwise it would be like, well, just as Jesus says, close the door and pray, right? But the thing is, your confession is at stake at this point. If it wasn't, it wouldn't matter. Okay? So there he is, as he had done previously. Well, if you're out to get Daniel, what are you going to be doing? You're going to be waiting. Oh, okay. So, and then I see on the lesson I skipped a section, but that's okay. I have verse 10, and then I don't have 11 through 14. So let's have fun. Okay. So then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. In other words, they found him. They were looking for Daniel. They knew his practice. That's why they set him up this way. So they're going, well, if he continues doing his normal practice, we will just kind of lurk around and catch him in the act. And then he's in violation of the king's decree. Okay? So they found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into a den of lions? Now right now, the king's like, but he can't rescind it. Right? So the king answered and said, these things stand fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. I mean, he knew Daniel was a faithful Jew. He knew he was religious. But somehow, maybe he didn't know that he prayed 3 times a day. Okay? We don't know exactly what he knew, but we know now he's not happy because he trusts Daniel, and there's probably very few people he can trust. Okay? So, yeah. I don't know, did I ever tell you a crazy story about Saddam Hussein? When he was in power, he actually liked Christians working for him more than Muslims. You go, well, but he's a Muslim. Because in his mind, I can trust Christians. See, they're less duplicitous. And so one of his like his most loyal guys, who was that nut job, who said, "Oh, there's no tanks in Baghdad when our tanks are rolling through the streets," right? So because for him, he didn't care whether you were this or that. He just did, will you obey me and not try to take over? And are you loyal to me? Those were the only things he cared about. And if you were loyal and everything else, he was fine. So the weird thing is, which often we Americans don't understand, is that if you were an ethnic or religious minority, not the Kurds, of course, they actually liked him because they just, well, we just don't threaten him. We just don't do anything he's going to consider threatening, and we're okay. But if you do something that he thinks is threatening, then you and your whole village is gone. We'll see that, as cruel and barbaric as that is, we'll see that it's not that far removed from what we're going to read here in Daniel. Okay? But right now, they have the king, and he can't do anything about it. Oh, I signed that. But he has to follow it. Okay? Because it's his decrees are so authoritative that he cannot even rescind them. Okay? Wow. Okay. Totally crazy town here. Okay. Let's press on. Okay. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, okay, know, O king, that is the law of the Medes and Persians, that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. They're just repeating it because, well, if I can get away with it, but he knows he really can't. Okay. Which makes me think that Daniel has already been promoted to basically the king's right-hand man, and then people underneath did this. That's because it seems like if he's there, then we need to do that before he's too powerful. And right now he's still an outsider and people are not happy, but once you have people who are used to his leadership and maybe people who have changed their minds, they'll go, okay, well, I didn't like him when he first went up there, but he's actually a good guy and he's not corrupt, and he rewards me for my good work. So you need to do this before people start really liking him. Okay. So all of this is what seems like is the case. Okay, now we're connecting the dots, but yeah. Okay? Okay. And I take it you're just kind of keeping your... I have a permanent question to ask. What is it? Can you go faster? All right. So let's press on, shall we? Then the king commanded, and Daniel was cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually deliver you. Because he has seen that before. But he doesn't know that God will, right? And I would say Daniel may not know. I mean, God's going to do what he's going to do, but, right? And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. So there was some type of seal where if the stone was moved, it would have broken the seal, and somebody would have known that somebody tampered with it. Okay, like, oh, okay, so this is to ensure that the king's decree is followed. Okay? Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. So he's not happy. He did not want this to happen. Okay? Now, I'm thinking from the Greek text, wasn't it, the Greek tells us that Habakkuk, that God brings Habakkuk 3 days or something later and gives him food and water or something for Daniel. So let's see if that kind of syncs up with the Aramaic text here. Okay, so but king is not happy. Okay, and it's kind of not that there was a seal, but I mean it's similar to Christ's tomb being sealed. It didn't have a sort of anything to show that somebody may have opened it. Somebody could have opened it and rolled the stone back, and it may have not been obvious unless you can see some of the dirt or soil moved a little bit more underneath. Okay, but this has a type of thing, and it's more of it's like a heavy lid. So it would be like say if you have a pot with a lid on top. It would be kind of like that, except it's a pit with stone. Okay. So, let's continue on. So, then at daybreak the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" So, Darius is quite concerned. He doesn't want to lose Daniel. But what does his behavior tell us? He's anxious. He's concerned. It's not as if, oh, well, I know this God's going to take care of him, so, eat, drink, and be merry, and Daniel will show up in a week or so. None of this. So he knows what God can do, but he doesn't know if God will do. Okay? So, okay. Verse 21. Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth." Now, did you notice Daniel's response? What did the satraps and some of the presidents, how did they address Darius? The same kind of way. So that must kind of be the standard greeting for the king. May you live forever, right? So somebody, I'm assuming people say it even if they don't mean it. Okay. Of course, forever really mean have a long reign and nobody threaten you and nobody try to overthrow your rule, et cetera, is really all the freight that comes with that. Okay. O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Okay? So here Daniel says an angel. Okay? It looks as if it's one night by the text. So it seems as if the Greek text, which was not written by Daniel, differs on the time. And of course, it could have been Habakkuk if God chose to use him. Okay? But right now, all we know is angel, God's messenger. So if I didn't know the Greek text, I'm thinking a heavenly being angel. Okay? And that kind of makes sense because Daniel's in there and the lions are hungry. Habakkuk. And, something has to stop the lions from eating him. And it's not going to be Habakkuk. So God could use Habakkuk to feed Daniel, but, God has to be doing something to keep the lions from eating him. Because if I'm a hungry lion and you've acquired a taste for human flesh, eat away. Well, that's what they eat. I'm not saying that's the only thing they eat, but they're kept hungry for that very purpose. Okay? So Daniel is not eaten. Now we're going to find out what happens when the king is not happy with you. Let's look at verse 24. Okay? And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. Now, from what we can tell, we don't know that they were maliciously accused. They came up with this decree. So they hoodwinked the king. He's angry. Okay? But there must be more going on, and the king must have known that they were talking bad about Daniel or something, right? Okay. But anyway, I think he's primarily angry because they duped him, made him look like a fool, and now, payback, right? So Those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. Like, wait a minute, That's how sometimes it works. You go, well, that's really horrible. But it's quite a deterrent if you're the dad, right? Because if you're working, you go, oh, well, if I mess up, my wife and kids might all be killed. Ooh. So then you have to navigate kind of everything a little more carefully. So they messed up. But this is not, this was not that weird of a punishment. Okay, so what I don't want you to think is go, oh, well, the scripture's exaggerating or whatever, and we just go, historically, this is not out of line. Okay, so there's no reason why we should doubt this. And also, the switch of punishment from fire to the den of lions also kind of matches, it fits Babylon's, view of things versus the Medo-Persian view of things. Okay, because the Medo-Persians, they don't want to use fire because of their religion. Okay, so all of this stuff just says, the emperor is not a happy camper. Okay, so I'm glad we're not living at that time, right? But so when we see stuff that other people have done, we go, well, it seems excessive, but there's not, like, North Korea is totally insane. I mean, they'll punish people for 3 generations. So it's like, okay, well, if you do something wrong, then the next 3 generations they're in a different caste. So the people who live in Pyongyang, well, their grandfather, they fought for the communists during the Korean War. And those who didn't, well, they're all living in the countryside, right? And so, if you mess up, it's bad. See, so they're not really communist. Technically, I don't know what they are. They're messed up. Okay, so this is when we see what is being done just within our lifetimes or within, say, our parents' lifetimes or something. You go, well, it's barbaric, but we've committed a whole lot of worse things as the human race. Okay? All right. So, there it is. Now I lost my spot, but anyway. Okay, so now we're at verse 25. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. So all the earth means what? The empire. So that's when you live within a large empire, all the earth doesn't mean all the earth as we understand the term. It means the entire empire. Okay? Which isn't weird because it's a huge swath of real estate. So as far as most people are concerned, it might as well be all the earth. Okay? And the New Testament uses that, right? The decree went out to all the earth by Caesar. Well, same sort of language. Okay? So we need to understand how language is kind of being used. Okay? So wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues, he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, he who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So, what is in effect he's saying? He's not telling everybody that they have to become Jewish, right? But the situation is that you have to, whatever you do, you can't slander the Jewish God. You can't badmouth it. You have to treat it with respect. And if not, So in other words, he's making it the same as if it's an official state religion. You have to treat it that way. And if not, you'll be in trouble. Though he doesn't make it an official state religion, but he treats it as that. So if there are people who don't like the Jews or want to do something against them, they're really going to have to be sneaky, or they're just going to have to stop. Because if Darius gets ear of it, as long as he's pro-Daniel, this is in effect. Okay? So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. So that's it for chapter 6. So, yeah. So Darius's decree transforms a personal deliverance story into an empire-wide acknowledgement of God's rule and authority. So, pretty wild, pretty good. So, and we're a few minutes early, but not too crazy. So, next week we'll look at chapter 7. Okay. I'm thinking about when we could, because I'm just trying, because a lot of this is now, he's having a lot of his visions, which are prophetic. So at some point, I think it would be fun if we kind of brought in, the story of Susanna. That's a good story. So, but I don't know when to bring it in, because I want it to kind of where it would fit in the text, but I'll have to think that one over. So, because the rest of it is really kind of, it's a lot more of the kind of the prophetic stuff and the end time sort of thing, and a lot more of this stuff. So we had some of the stuff that matched Revelation and that connected to it, and now we haven't had that, and now that's going to kick back in. So there's going to be a lot more of that sort of thing. So we'll have to get ready for that. Okay?
Did Daniel have heirs, family?
I think he did, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, I mean, the default is that you did if you were Jewish. So, but I can't say for certain. So, but yeah, so it would, what was it in the story of, when you go back through, kind of look at the history of kind of who were rabbis and who were not. There's only one account of one guy who wasn't married as a rabbi, and that just seemed kind of weird. And so after that, it was like, after that, if you're going to go to rabbinical school, you have to be married. So totally different from medieval Roman Catholicism, right? So medieval Roman Catholicism is not married. Well, that kicked in. It depends where you were in Germany or Europe. 1200, 1300s, as late as 14 something, depending on, because a lot of places it really wasn't enforced. But pretty much by 1500 it was universal, within the Latin rite of Catholicism. And and so often the best scholars in Europe weren't married. Some of them had kids. And then, but in Judaism it was different. So the best scholars and the brightest usually had large families. So it'd be interesting to do an IQ test to see if Jews are a little smarter than other, because of that. Who knows? But that's just me kind of getting weird. So, all right, next week we'll chapter 7 and beyond. And so chapter 7 is when it goes back to the Hebrew text within chapter 7. Okay? All right, let's pray, shall we? Our Father, how wonderful it is that so much of this is included as to what took place with Daniel, how he was faithful, how you took care of him and watched over him. May we have such faith. Even if you do not do such grand miracles, we know that you watch over us, that you are working things for our eternal good, and let us be content with that, and whatever else you may choose to bless us in your way and in your time. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.